Hello everyone, welcome back to OCD Recovery's YouTube channel. I wanted to talk about the potential problems that come along with identity anything. So identifying yourself as a good person, identifying yourself as a bad person. We know that there's no such thing as an inherently good or bad person from the principles of Stoicism that what kind of formulated REBT, which Dr. Albert Ellis, basically what happened was Dr. Albert Ellis started as a psychoanalyst. So psychoanalysis came really from Freud and Jung. And a lot of the psychoanalysis that was going on was really diving into the past, really giving meaning to dreams, which in my opinion, dreams don't have any meaning whatsoever. Not even from an OCD perspective, I don't think dreams have any meaning. It's just synapses firing in the brain for whatever reasons in the subconscious level. They don't correlate. And what people do is, they'll have a dream and then something will happen and they'll connect it, but that's just your own connection. There's no actual proof of that connection. So what happened was in the early 50s, and he was a sex and marriage therapist as well, he started to realize that psychoanalysis had really poor results for people's emotional disturbances. And this isn't even an OCD perspective. It's from a general emotional disturbance perspective. So people who are chronically depressed, anxious, had a lot of shame, guilt. He obviously was applying this to OCD and PTSD, but didn't really know, I don't think in his own way, how to directly apply it to OCD. Since he never experienced OCD, I think it's hard to even see it in a lot of different ways because of the nuances. So I do believe that psychoanalysis and diving into the past can have some merit from an acknowledging standpoint, but I don't think it has any other merit really besides that. Once you get past that, it really comes down to a CBT, exposure response prevention. And exposures too are not just for OCD people. If there's something you're scared of, such as social anxiety, and there's not a disorder present, you still need to expose yourself to certain situations and work on your belief system. And then basically REBT was formed. And the reason, in my opinion, why REBT, sorry, I got something in my eye, why REBT probably hasn't gotten the light that maybe some of the other therapies is REBT tends to be very blunt in the way it's used. It really gets under the core fear for people, and people don't like that. We really want a wishy-washy approach. We want to go into group therapy and talk, and there's nothing wrong with that. But many people who attend group therapy and talks for years don't actually solve any of their problems, because solving their problems needs a hard amount of discomfort and really looking into your irrational beliefs. And this goes outside OCD. So, basically what happens in life, and it's everywhere, is that people believe that they are something in their entirety. Let's use a simple example as a basketball player. Someone will say, I'm a basketball player, but are they actually a basketball player? Or are they a person who plays basketball? The self is an ever-changing process. It's constantly moving and constantly changing. People always say stuff like, and I don't use these terminologies anymore because I don't think they make a lot of sense. They'll say something like, I'm an extrovert or I'm an introvert. But that would mean that your entire being is that. And that doesn't make a lot of sense because there's people who were classified as introverts and then changed to extroverts as the time went on. So I think it's just not as simple to say that that person is something in an entirety. So when you really go into I'll explain in my opinion why identity anything, in my opinion, falls directly into the victimhood mentality and then directly into, and this is beyond OCD, just a philosophical talk, why it plays directly into that and why it plays directly into conditional self-acceptance. So let's say I walked around all day and I introduced myself as a white, Italian, Irish male from New Jersey. That insinuates a belief system that you need to accept me for who I am. If you don't, you are a bad person and I can accept you. As the majority of human beings operate off agreement means acceptance. They don't operate off agreement doesn't mean acceptance. And this is where the whole Stoicism, because, the principles of REBT, unconditional self-life, other acceptance, are from Greco-Roman philosophy. Some take it from Epicureanism in a sense, but primarily Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations is a great book for that. One of the main techniques in Stoicism is called negative visualization, where you kind of wake up and you say, everyone, a lot of people I'm going to come across today will be mean to me. They might be rude to me. They might give me crass and do these other things, and I can accept all that and kind of prepare. A lot of people think that that's a negative way to go about your day, but I think it's actually a really good way to go about your day since you're preparing yourself for the hardships in life. The other thing that Identity X does for people This is politics, religion, money, mental disorder, identity, OCD. I don't walk around all day and say, hi, I'm Nick, the kid with OCD, or hi, I'm Nick, I'm OCD. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I have obsessive compulsive disorder, but I also have a bunch of other traits about me as well. I like music, I like techno, I like soft rock, I like pizza, I like hiking. So I couldn't say I'm a hiker. I could supposedly say that, but that doesn't make a lot of sense because in my opinion, I'm not a hiker. I'm just a person who enjoys hiking. And you say to me, well, Nick, what's the difference? You're arguing semantics. But if I was arguing semantics, we wouldn't see people in sports getting extremely depressed when they leave their sport. So it's not actually semantics. It's a fine line. And you teeter over either side of that line. And in my opinion, as I said again, the self is an ever-changing process. So when you teeter over to that side, to where you're not attaching your identity to something, you more than likely, in my opinion, from the principles of REBT and Stoicism and what we see with anxiety sufferers, another great example is it's very hard to imagine what an OCD sufferer will go through when they're trying to recover. It's something you can't experience. You can't work with someone and they tell you that I've heard people say, oh, I gave myself sensory motor to experience it. That's nonsense, super dangerous, and not intelligent verbiage coming out of people. There's really no other way to talk about that except for it's very, very stupid. It would be as if I said something along the lines of, oh, I close my eyes, I definitely know what it's like to be blind. That's a very, very silly statement. People who are working with OCD, if you're watching this and you don't have OCD, it's very hard for you to, when you say stuff like, I understand what it feels like, you don't understand. That's okay. We're just telling you that from the sufferer's perspective, it looks kind of silly to us because we know you don't understand. This doesn't mean you don't have an understanding about OCD. I know people who don't have OCD who have a very good understanding about OCD. Having the disorder definitely gives you an edge when you come out the other side. I think that's an irrefutable fact that sufferers and anxiety sufferers understand. So when you're identifying with OCD, what you're doing is you're playing a victim card. You're playing a very heavily victim card and you're actually not moving with the ever-changing self, right? So when you say, I have OCD, what are you actually saying to yourself? I, myself, my being, my entire being is OCD, which is not true. Not in the sense from an REBT and Stoicism perspective, because you're not just OCD, you're other things. You could be a father, you could be a mother. Take away the good and bad people. How do you classify someone as good and bad? The values and the morals that you have, values and morals come from religion. Again, this is not a knock on religion. I'm just using this as a perspective. The values come from religion in many senses, the belief systems of good and evil. Those belief systems are belief systems that you adopted. They're not universal principles. So your understanding of what a good person is cannot inherently mean what a good person is because it's your perspective. Life is simply a game of perspectives. And the more we move into a more, in my opinion, REBT Stoicism rational outlook on this is what that means, it makes it a little bit easier to see things as there's no inherent deservingness. There's no inherent fairness. The concepts of fairness, deservingness, and revenge get more people into emotional trouble than anything, than really anything. If you look at World War II or World War I or Vietnam or any major war or the Civil War, the major wars probably in the last 250 years, getting back to the Civil War, 1776. Those wars are predicated off of good and evil beliefs from other people. One group of people, viewed someone else as bad, so they did X thing to them because they did consider them bad. There is a great philosophy, the art of war, that looks into the last stage that you want to do in a confrontational situation is actual physical combat. You want to do many other steps to get to diffuse the situation, but that's not what's going on with people because we identify a certain thing. So, when people say I am a Christian or a Muslim or I'm Catholic, yes, I understand why people believe that, but that's not actually in reality what's going on. In reality, what's going on is you are a person who practices Christianity to certain degrees. You have other things about you that are not entirely 100% Christian. Even when you think they are, when broken down to their simplest fact, it doesn't make a lot of sense from an REBT and Stoicism perspective. Again, that doesn't mean you can't be religious. It just, we look at things that, I'm reading a great book right now talking about habit building. And there's lots of great takeaways in that book. But one of the things I do not agree with is the fact that people need to identify as something. So they say, identify as a healthier person. No, you're just a person who eats healthy. And then people say to me, well, why does that make any sense? The reason why it makes sense to me in the way I see things in my perspective is, I'm always willing to talk about this in the comments, whether you agree with me or not. That's regardless. We could just have a conversation. Is that when someone changes their identity from, say, being unhealthy to healthy, and something goes wrong in their life and they're no longer healthy again, whether it's physical illness, gaining a bunch of body weight, they are way more prevalent, the chances of them being chronically depressed, anxious, shame, and guilt, because they've now attached themselves to their identity. So what people do is they'll have an identity, they'll attach it the other way to another identity, and that kind of sets them up for disaster in the long term. So you have to remember, when you are looking at something in your life, no matter how much you're into that thing, you have to break it down and look at it. Am I actually that thing? No, we are just people who have traits, personality traits that change. We see it. A lot of people believe your personality is fixed. I don't believe in that. There's no actual evidence to truly support in a factual statement that personality traits are 100% gold, like they will not change ever. Moment talks about that he used to classify himself as very extroverted. Now he's a lot more introverted in the way. I know people that say, I'm an introvert, I'm an introvert. Well, when you tell yourself over and over and over again that you're introverted, or you tell yourself over and over again that you're extroverted, when something goes against that and you're like, well, that's not who I am, that's not who I am, that's just not what's happening. It's just you are a person who primarily does enjoy speaking to other people, but there are times where you like your alone time. But we try to classify things. There's a really good movie called Lucy. And you ask me, why am I bringing up Lucy with Scarlett Johansson? When Scarlett Johansson is first showing the doctors her hand and changing and talking about 1 + 1 = 2, she goes, 1 + 1 is never equal 2. There's actually no quantifiable way. We've just put meaning on 1 + 1 = 2. Now we're getting really philosophical and very deep. This is just the way I see things. I'm not saying I'm correct by any means. It just makes the most sense to me from the principles of REBT. We quantify things with titles because they make more sense and they're simpler to understanding. We can put people in categories. But the problem is when you identify with something, as I said now 3 or 4 times, you're setting yourself up for emotional disaster potentially when things go wrong. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I've been thinking about this a lot for the last couple days, and I wasn't sure how I wanted to talk about it. But I think that you have to really think about what you're identifying yourself as and really break down that that's just a characteristic of who you are, and move forward from there, because that's essential with OCD and anxiety recovery. It's also essential for regulating your emotions through a stoicism perspective. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.